Hi, I'm Matt Dillon, President of Green Roofs Australasia and a board member for Wigan. Thanks for joining me here today. Central Park, the revolutionary symbiotic planting and building concept for Sydney's newest residents. It's an integrated experience for living in harmony with the natural world. It's located at number 1 Broadway, Sydney. Today I'm presenting an overview of the project, concepts, construction, planning, and the vertical garden installation, followed by an interview with Patrick Blanc himself. Also, I'll be talking about the newest, grooviest Sydney nightclub with a blue roof and a green roof. So sit back and enjoy. Central Park, Sydney will be spanning 5.8 hectares. It will be a mixed-use development combining residential, retail, commercial, and community spaces, underpinned by exemplary social and environmental sustainability initiatives. The 30,000 square metres of parklands with green roofs and vertical gardens will be an exemplary example of how green architecture is filtering its way through Sydney's urban fabric. The Central Park timeline was the project began in 2007 and is on track to being completed in 2013. The east and west central towers of One Central Park were designed by Parisian architect Jean Nouvel with PTW architects. The vertical gardens were designed by Patrick Blanc. The collaboration between Jean and Patrick has been well established, and the outcome was to create the continuity of the ground level parklands onto the vertical gardens and pushing the landscape into the sky. This is indeed a fine example of where landscape becomes architecture and will become one of the most iconic examples in the world today. This former brewery building will be incorporated as one of 9 buildings to provide a strong connection to the urban fringe community of Chippendale. New open public parklands have created a gateway to Central Park's proposed marketplaces, cafes, restaurants, and shopping complex, which will integrate the existing heritage neighbourhoods with the project's 2,000 new apartments, creating a socially unified urban village to be completed in stages over the next 8 years, at a cost of $2 billion. Gantries are being utilised for the vertical garden installation and future maintenance. Prefabricated steel brackets were bolted to slab edge anchors to provide a fixed vertical platform for prefabricated panels to attach, providing a necessary air gap of 150 millimetres between the building facade and the vegetated panels. The system design and planning specs provided by Patrick, built off-site, wrapped and delivered ready for fixing. These PVC panels have 2 12mm layers of French non-biodegradable synthetic felt matting, fixed by staples and chalk marked to create the specific design. The outer layer is slit for plant plugs to be inserted and then stapled to create a semicircular pocket. The roots extend between the 2 layers. Irrigation lines are wrapped in felt and fixed to the panels in ready for connection to the main feeder lines. Patrick had previously trialled this system 5 kilometres west at Camperdown on the Trio Apartments. Pictured here, this 33 by 5 metre wall was installed in 2009 using 4,528 native Australian plants from 69 species. In 2011, to everyone's horror, it was left unactivated with no vegetation for 6 days. This coincided with hot weather and many plants died. However, no other human errors have occurred since, and the plants have maintained good health. The lower planting requires more shade, and gardenia and viola were used. The top level of plants, which are subject to more direct sun, have acacia and poa. The plants were selected for their hardiness and tolerance due to a range of harsh climatic differences varying from salt-laden nor'easters in the summer and high temperatures, and strong winter southerly winds. As we scoot back up the road to Central Park, you'll see that the system panels are virtually identical. The typical Australian characteristics for plants are salt and drought tolerant. They have to endure harsh summer temperatures, strong winds, and in this case, after these plants were just settling, Sydney experienced the hottest summer ever, with highs of 40 degrees Celsius. However, they continue to establish. Some of the mosses were affected in the heat and some plants wilted. However, with green roofs and green walls, it's an evolution, with new species being introduced by birds, some thriving, some not, which is why maintenance and regular monitoring is required over the initial 2 years. Plants closer to the street are subject to more shade and less wind, and of course more carbon emissions from the major traffic artery below. Of course, plants at the highest levels, being 350 metres above ground level, are subject to extreme temperatures and wind. Something that Patrick discovered at the Trio Apartments, and you'll notice in this picture here, is that he used Rio grid to give the plants more stability due to the high winds. With the intent for an astounding treehouse retreat or high-tech bower in the heavens, Patrick has incorporated planters which spill cascading creepers, vines, and foliage swaying in the breeze, with vines and creepers also ascending like green snakes up fixed stainless steel cables between floors. These plants will connect the massive vertical garden panels with horizontal bands, hopefully creating a mad green patchwork tapestry rising from the parklands below at ground level. Patrick is just going to fill you in on the progress as he's coming to Sydney in 2 weeks.
Okay, hello everybody, hello Matt, pleasure to meet you again for this conference. So yes, I'm very excited by this project in Sydney. It's with Jean Nouvel, the famous French architect, with whom I did work already quite many times. And it's very exciting because it's a big patches, so 20 to 50 meters high, all along the facade. And the facade is almost, just in front of UTS building, is almost 150 meters. So you can understand that the patches at the top of the building, of course, receive full light, full wind, right? And so, you know, sometimes in Sydney it's very hot wind. Yes. So of course I did choose different species according to different levels. For instance, for middle levels, a plant I love in the Blue Mountains is Melaleuca hypericifolia. So this I did choose for middle, but for the top plants, of course I did choose some other Melaleuca growing more close to the sea. So many different species because I did use about 250 native Australian species. So it's a real challenge. And also almost 180 also exotic species to have some different kind of flowers at different seasons. So it will be almost 450 species. So it will be really a kind of botanical garden between the earth, between the pavement and the sky. So for me it's very, very exciting on different facades, so not the same exposition. So for me it will be the highest I've ever done, so I'm very excited. And I come in 2 weeks to see. It did begin last week. The installation did begin just last week.
Okay. And which part of the process do you think will need to be monitored most closely?
So at the beginning, of course, during the establishment of the plants, because the plants, of course, are small, they are cultivated since 1 year, and they are regularly pruned to have many branches at the base, because in full wind it's more important to have not a single stem, but to have many branches, are much more wind resistant. So of course, as soon as the felt is not totally covered, we have to be very careful about not to dry, because the felt has not to dry out, because the young roots need humidity. So at the beginning I give more water, and after 3 or 4 months we'll reduce, of course, the water amount. Hopefully all the water will come from collected water from the roof, and also all the grey water, because it's high building, so you have a lot of grey water in the apartment. So all the water is recycled and is used to give the water to the panels of vertical gardens. And also for all the other plants, horizontal plants also, so it's ecologically it will be really sustainable.
Exactly, and that's usually one of the first criticisms that people have, is that
the system will use too much water.
Yes, but
What you're saying is that the plants will take the water that they need, and
course.
that it does not need to be flooded like most people think, and the water is being recycled. Grey water, storm water, and there are recycle tanks being put into the project.
Of course, exactly. Recycle down tanks, and of course, too much water means development of blue-green algae, bacteria. So it's not good because the roots have not oxygen enough to grow. So it's just 1 or 2 minutes of watering every 3, 4, 5 hours. So and excess of water is collected. So of course, it's not always covered with water.
Okay.
Of course. It's not aquatic plants, not at all.
But this is good because people need to know and understand the system, because in Australia this system is new. How have you found sourcing the plants? Because nurseries, has that been good?
You have the chance to have good nurseries. For instance, around Melbourne, you have a Corangas nurseries where they are growing maybe 1 or 2,000 different Australian native species. In Australia, you are lucky because you have many very well specialized nurseries in native plants. In Europe, it's not at all the same. You have only plants from China or from Riviera, many Australian plants also, of course. But here in Australia, same as in South Africa, you are growing many of your native species. So it's very, very interesting.
So you think there's great potential for Australian plants for green walls?
Yes, because you have so many cliffs facing the sea or in the mountains. So you have so many plant species growing with very, your soils usually are quite poor or very poor in nutrients, especially phosphorus. And as you have a very low amount of phosphorus, you have many plants who develop association with fungi because fungus don't like too much phosphorus. And as you have very low amounts of phosphorus in Australia, you have many plant species developing very close mycorrhizal associations. So you have really special things in Australia. It's very exciting.
Okay. So I hope you enjoy your next visit to Australia. It's fantastic that this project is going. It's great for the industry, good for Sydney, good for Australia.
Yes, so 10 days.
On behalf of GRA, thank you very much for this short but informative interview.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Daniel, thanks very much for joining us here today. Greenroofs Australasia really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
With all projects, there are always restraints by the client, or did you just have free rein on this particular project?
Well, the client for Ivy was very ambitious, a perfectionist, and looking really for a world-class entertainment precinct. So from the outset, they were going to settle for nothing less than the best in pursuing, whatever we could do to make this project, that's something that would stand out on the world stage. So we were lucky to be part of a great collaborative group of consultants, and the process was very fluid. I'm not saying that we redesigned everything, but there was certainly quite a few manifestations of what the landscape was from the initial concepts to what you see up on the rooftop and on the streetscape today.
And this particular site has George Street below, which is one of the busiest streets in Sydney.
Yeah.
And we're surrounded by buildings. What were your particular thoughts when you looked at this site?
Well, to create a place that was surprising, and that's the unique opportunity in a city like Sydney, that this is effectively a stage. It's a stage for people to come and enjoy themselves and be seen to be enjoying themselves. So that was a great opportunity. We wanted to cloak the building. It's a beautiful modern gesture in the city, and it's been awarded generously, as a contribution to urban design for Sydney, and top state awards, and I think national awards as well. So, the landscape obviously, as with any project, needed to integrate with it, but it was always key to the building that it was a partnership between the landscape and the architecture. With a name like Ivy, it sort of demanded that it was going to be like that.
So as far as noise, wind loads, sun, tell us about the space. How is it used? I know it's a nightclub, and you also have a restaurant here.
Yeah.
Do people actually use the pool, and is it recreational? Were you trying to sort of keep a relaxed
atmosphere with some sort of sophistication for night.
Yeah, definitely.
Fun.
You sort of touched on a few interesting points at the beginning, because the conditions that dictate what was able to be planted in this space, obviously being in the middle of the city, there's a certain amount of ambient air temperature. There are unique sort of wind loads. There's microclimates created by buildings around this space and by this building itself. In the building adjacent to us, it's actually quite a deep atrium, which we have a big Japanese maple in, and a whole lot of plants cascading from balconies there. So we had to think about wind along the street and all the planting that spills out into the street, which is my actual favourite gesture. I think that's what makes the greatest contribution of the landscape, more than the rooftop, I think, is just what you see when you look down George Street. So we had to consider that. We had to consider winter, summer, all the obvious things, but there's a whole lot of hardscape you can see in this building, and the greatest environmental challenge is actually people. At the end of the day, when you get a building that's used like this for the kind of behaviour that goes on up here, we were very ambitious, and the client was very ambitious to create something that was absolutely spectacular and tickled the imagination of anybody who walked in. So different environments had different feels to them, when we sort of looked at Palm Springs and Brazilian modernism overlaid with a real domestic scale of things. So that's where the pots, the small potted plants come in, and the little balcony planters overlaid with the bigger trees, the big figs behind us, the palm trees, and all those sort of things. But it's how the plants interact with people that's actually the greatest challenge.
And indeed it does work, it's really stunning. I'd probably classify it as a blue roof, green roof. Can you tell us something about the build? What were some of the challenges and the constraints to the build?
Well, because as much space as possible in a venue like this needs to be used for people. So as much as we would have loved to have extensive green roofs and a great deal larger volumes of soil, the reality is that that sort of space needed to be taken up with patrons. So it was a compromise to be found between those two things. So really, we worked with the architects to make sure that we had efficiencies in soil volumes for trees. We actually found that we could get quite narrow on the planter boxes, where they're the balcony planter boxes, a little bit wider where we needed a little bit more volume, more cascading plants that had more of an impact on the facades. But we managed to get quite a low-fi level of technology here, and quite limited widths in some planter boxes. They're 200 millimetres wide but 600 millimetres deep. So where we were constrained laterally, at least we had the long longitude for soil depth and the depth, soil volume and the an ample depth to make sure that we could get sustainability in the plantings.
So the process 360 went through. Did you use any consultants like hydraulic engineers, horticulturalists? You all in-house, or did you also consult?
Yeah, we're all in-house with all those things, and we work with the hydro engineers to make sure that the irrigation was correctly tuned. And obviously, like anything, it's an evolutionary process. So plant establishment is the key. Certainly when a venue opens like this, things have to look good straight away. It's not like, we can start with smaller tube stock and wait for things to grow. It had to look, pretty good from day one, and that also has its challenges, because those plants have come, we've tried to condition them as much as possible in the nursery before they came here, but you can't replicate what the conditions of the city are, what the conditions of concrete and reflectivity and 40-degree days and hot nor'westers. So that kind of thing, took a lot of work with the in-house maintenance people, just to make sure that, as issues arose, whether they be, pests because of humidity, because you get sort of sinks of humidity in some cases, and just making sure that the maintenance, at least in the initial stages, was really up to scratch.
Did you use a drainage cell, or as you said before, it was quite low tech?
Yeah, definitely.
What sort of soil specifications did you use
Lightweight planter box mix, pretty low in organic matter. So it's really about nutrient dispersal as much as anything, and making sure we use some organic nutrients to top up regularly rather than sort of having a higher organic mix initially. It's been really successful. We've been fortunate, and I think the low tech. There's a lot to be said for it.
Yeah. So as far as plant specification, did you go for something that was a bit more drought tolerant, or did you mainly go for canopy cover and shade aesthetic?
Definitely had to be tough. So you can see the species, the bigger species, the Washingtonias and the figs, they're sort of naturally conditioned to high levels of exposure. And the other plants, we wanted to. Fortunately, the base look and feel of the landscape is that it is wild. It is about a bit of an urban jungle, and so we wanted the plants to colonise the space and really overlay the modern robust architecture with something that was a little bit more like a landscape that had been colonised. So that's been beneficial because it's not high maintenance. That the landscape's allowed to evolve on its own merits.
I noticed behind you there's plants growing on a separate level. Can you tell me something about that?
Yeah, so there's an on-site nursery. That's as much to do with the detail planting. We talked about having pots, and there's lots of pots throughout the space. There's some up here on the rooftop, on the pool, but throughout the space there's quite a lot of pots. And there's different conditions. There's shadier conditions and undercrofts and areas which get more exposed to sun. So by having an on-site nursery, we can replicate those conditions much more accurately, and it's natural to replenish a garden with new plantings, and we have to be conscious of that ourselves, and we also obviously need our clients to understand that. It's one of the fundamental things, I think, from the outset, that we made that clear with the client, and they understood. They have a good horticultural understanding, so it wasn't a message which we had to drive home, and so that became part of the development of the ideas from the outset.
Okay, I think sometimes we can be a bit idealistic and want the whole roof covered in vegetation, and I think that's why it's important to actually look at the site and get as much vegetation as we can possibly get, given the circumstances. Would you say that given more scope and control with the job, you would have added more vegetation? Or
Not necessarily. I think that's the point. Is that where we get an opportunity, we take an opportunity, and I think our job is to be as creative as possible with what we've got. And sometimes, the high tech, the structurally engineered rooftops or green walls that require high maintenance just are preclusive to a lot of clients. So, the way that we can green cities, the way that we can, reduce all the environmental factors, the issues that we need to reduce, and the way that we can improve social sustainability by having better rooftop spaces in cities that are more habitable. And we're on a rooftop. You look across the city for an aerial view. There's not many people on rooftops in Sydney, so we make the best of what we've got. We've got climbers like Salandra cascading over tiny little in narrow little planters, but they have an incredible amount of impact because they throw up in long tendrils, and they have the same sort of visual impact that maybe something else might have required more soil volume to attain that kind of thing. So as ever, it's problem solving. We've had experience where we've been fortunate to have an extensive green roof at M Central over in Ultimo, which has probably started us off in the green roof and green infrastructure realm. And that doesn't always happen. It happens on that kind of scale infrequently. But we're working on small projects, inner city projects, on tiny little balconies and putting pots on them, and the impact that has on people's lives can be as equally powerful as an extensive green roof or a 24 high metre green wall. So everything that we do has to fit what's presented to us. We can obviously present as much of a case as we can, but slowly catchy monkey, as much as possible. And there's no harm in going back to those low-tech, lo-fi kind of technologies and embracing that, because they are accessible, and that is, if we can spread the message by making things happen in more circumstances, then we're going to have better chances to do more ambitious projects down the track.
Yeah. As you know, in Australia, water is a scarce commodity, and I was talking to Patrick Blanc about Central Park. He said that tanks were put under that project to collect the water that they could use for irrigation. Have you done similar here?
Well, there's water tanks down below. You can see there's a fair bit of concrete, a fair bit of thermal insulation naturally in this building. So there's a good amount of concrete between all the planters. Plus drainage cell provides further insulation to insulate the planters. So we don't tend to get as much drying out as you might normally with a thinner planter profile. That was something we built in obviously early to try to minimise water use and water loss. But how long ago was it that we were building desalination plants for fear of not being able to have water through the city, and then now we can't get rid of the we can't get rid of the rain. So we always have to have the backup system, of course. It's just about being able to ride the droughts and flooding rains that we get in Australia. So when you need it, if there's going to be a 40-degree day, you've got it. And otherwise, once the plants are established and they're sort of, they've adapted, then it's about using water as you need it rather than having it come on twice a week necessarily.
I mean, obviously one of the benefits for this project has been the use of the amenity space in high-rise development in the city. Have you found any new habitats being formed, or an increase in bird life, or
plenty of bird life up on Ivy? Different kind of bird life, I think.
Okay.
I think human bird life. But look, every project that we've done Green Roofs for, no matter how big or small, the day the soil went down at M Central, there was birds on the roof looking for worms, and up there now there's bees, there's wasp nests, and there's a whole ecosystem up there hanging on to leaves of agaves. And so besides the fact that there's humans, pets as well, occupying the space, so it's that kind of environment definitely. Bird life, definitely. Insect life, of course. So yeah, definitely. And what we're sort of
on the contribution to the environment.
Yeah. So, I mean, what really excites our practice is the social sustainability side of things. I think there's no question that the environmental benefits are well documented, and as soon as you put a plant anywhere, there's an aphid, there's a ladybug, there's an insect, there's a microorganism that's starting a new ecosystem. But it's really that human habitat that's most vital. And now not only we're seeing residential spaces, entertainment spaces, and now we're working on quite a number of healing gardens for mental health and cancer centres in the city, where rooftop landscapes are being utilised for healing. So we're seeing that social sustainability benefit really extend into all realms, and that's incredibly exciting for us.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. In hindsight, any lessons learned from this particular project? Positives that you would carry on to the next project?
Yeah, it's
really an evolving process.
It is an evolving process, and you learn new things about different plant species all the time, and how fragile or how robust they can be in different situations, because a lot of these plants are relatively untested, at least in our neck of the woods. We have great precedent images of fantastic green roofs from all over the world, New York, Germany, Canada, you know, to name but a few, in France, green walls in France, and really we're just touching, you know, a fountain of knowledge here about really what works and what doesn't in Australia, because, you know, our conditions are so unique. So, you know, we've learned things about different species, and thankfully the majority of plants are still happy here.
Yeah, they look healthy.
Yeah. So we haven't really had too much changeover. We used one plant, Amanda Villa, for some of the planter boxes, the smaller planter boxes, which were actually steel. They're more balcony planters, and they just didn't really handle the conditions so well. So we replaced them with a native climber, Hibertia scandens, and they haven't taken a backward step. So, funnily enough, an exotic species replaced by a native species, and it's thrived. Not surprising. And I guess, you know, as we become more comfortable with our own plant species, and we can, you know, generate a unique Australian palette that works here, you know, that's only going to take a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of, or some faith from our clients, some of our own research, which is, you know, vital that we sort of have, you know, Green Roofs Australasia assisting, doing trials of species, of our own species that are going to be suitable, you know, for the kind of projects that, you know, are right for our very, very diverse, even in this country, you know, situations.
I was just talking to Rebecca, the publicist for Ivy, and it's possible that we can have the reception for the World Green Infrastructure Congress in 2014 up here. So that would be a fantastic event to hold up here. I'd really like to appreciate thank you for your time today. It's been great.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. It's a privilege to be part of what you guys are doing, and to be asked to, you know, talk a little bit about what we're doing. So, thank you.
So keep up the good work.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I know we're down under, I know it's a long way to come, but when you come to Australia for the Congress, you'll have the opportunity to see the real beauty in Australia. Come and join us. You'll enjoy it.